Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. The alleged gang rape and torture of two Nepalese women in the home of a senior Saudi diplomat has presented India with one of the most awkward and difficult diplomatic situations imaginable. Not only is it a sensitive and unprecedented situation, but it critically affects two important countries, Nepal, a close neighbor, and Saudi Arabia, a critical friend. With the episode at the center of the news, and with both Riyadh and Kathmandu closely watching how India handles developments, tonight we ask three critical questions. How adroitly has India handled matters? What impact could this have on relations with Saudi Arabia and Nepal? And could it have wider repercussions on India's relations with West Asia, where 7 million Indians presently work? My guest, the former Foreign Secretary Kanwal Sibal, India's former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Oman and the UAE, Talmiz Ahmed, the South Asia Bureau Chief of the Syrian Arab News Agency, Wael Awad, the Senior Assistant Editor of the Indian Express, Shubhajit Roy, and the Senior Writer of India Today, Jyoti Malhotra. Kanwal Sibal, let's first begin by asking the question, how well have we as a state handled this difficult situation? And I'm talking about the Indian system, not just the government. First, was the police right to barge into the residence of an accredited diplomat, which is a clear breach of the Vienna Convention?
Well, I am told, and my information may not be correct, that they may not have actually violated the premises. They didn't enter the door, but then I don't know really. But
Can I stop you there? I'm going to stop you for one reason. Can I stop you? This is what let me stop you. The Hindu yesterday on its front page says the following. In a video, police is seen barging into the residence, pushing aside family members, physically resisting their entry. The Hindu quoting this video says that the police barged in and family members were trying to resist the police and were pushed aside.
Yes, okay, if that is so, then it's a technical lapse, but given the gravity of the situation, it's possible that the police were not fully aware that he was a diplomat. You got to prove your diplomatic immunity, because after all, people from embassies stay in all sorts of places and they are not all diplomats, they are also from the non-diplomatic staff. So there is a bit of a grey area, but given the gravity of the allegations against the Saudi person or diplomat, I suppose one may not take a very serious view of this technical lapse of the Vienna Convention.
Shubhajit Roy, Kanwal Sibal, the former Foreign Secretary, calls it a technical lapse. He also questions whether in fact the police knew that this was the home of a diplomat. Now, according to the FIR, the NGO contacted the Gurgaon police. Is it at all credible that the NGO would not have known that these two women were in the home of a Saudi diplomat? After all, the same NGO smuggled a phone to these two women through the security guard on the premises, and surely that security guard would have told the NGO, this is the home of a diplomat. And in that event, the NGO would have told the police. So can it be the case the police didn't know this was the home of a diplomat?
Absolutely, you're right, because in that particular complex, as we understand now, there are at least half a dozen diplomats who stay there. And in any area where diplomats stay, the service providers, everybody knows, because the cars have CD number plates, number one. Number two, they maintain a registry where one knows who's who. So it is absolutely improbable that the police, the local cops, didn't know that this was a house of a diplomat.
In fact, Jyoti Malhotra, this is not just an ordinary diplomat. He was first secretary in the Saudi embassy, which means he was a very senior, high-level diplomat. Secondly, Saudi Arabia is a very important country for India. Thirdly, I'm told that in fact there are 4 or 5 other Saudi diplomats living in the same complex, so he's not the only one. Therefore, could it be possible that the Gurgaon police would be unaware that there were diplomats, not 1 but 4 or 5 from the same embassy living in this premise? I mean, would the police be unaware of it?
But are you saying, Karan, that just because he is a diplomat, and does that mean that he cannot be held, or we're not saying that he is going to be arrested, but are you saying that just because he's a diplomat, therefore he cannot be sort of accused of this, the kind of
No, I'm not talking about
torture and rape?
accusation. I'm not talking about accusation.
Yeah.
I'm talking about barging into the home of a diplomat when in fact the family members are resisting the police's entry, which is a clear breach of at least 3 separate sections of the Vienna Convention. And that's a known fact.
But I'm willing to give the Gurgaon police the benefit of the doubt to the extent that they perhaps didn't know that barging into the house of a diplomat violates several of the conventions that you just talked about. And
This is very interesting.
maybe, I don't know.
Maybe,
I don't know.
I'm not quarreling with you. I'm just picking up on something you said. So far, the line given by Vikas Swarup when he's been talking to the press as spokesman is that in fact the Gurgaon police didn't know this was a diplomat's home. You're saying they may have known it's the home of a
I'm
diplomat,
not saying
but
that
they didn't know it's a breach of the Vienna Convention to barge in.
I'm not saying that they didn't, whether they knew or they didn't know. I'm not saying that. I don't have that kind of information. So if Vikas Swarup, who is the MEA spokesperson, says that they didn't know that this was the house of a diplomat, but Shubhajit has pointed out very rightly that there are several CD number plates. Listen, I think you have to give the Gurgaon police the benefit of the doubt.
What doubt are we giving them the benefit of? Clarify that for me.
I'll tell you
what's
that.
that?
The benefit of the doubt is that for a change, the police in Gurgaon or elsewhere in our country, they don't have a very good reputation of speaking up for or being on the side of the so-called victims. In this particular case, the NGO, which is Mehti
But what is the
Nepal,
benefit of the doubt you're giving
I'll tell
them?
you what the benefit of the doubt is, that here is this NGO which has gone to the police, this woman who escaped supposedly from this house, and goes to the police and says that there are these 2 women who are being tortured in this house. So here is the police that barges within quotes
Well, not
into
within
the
quotes.
house.
That's exactly the
Okay.
language of the Hindu.
Okay, they
and
barge in.
incidentally, it's in other papers too.
Sure.
But what is the doubt you're giving the benefit of? All you're doing to me is to say that you're happy the police acted in a situation where
I'm
someone
very
was
happy
accused of
that-
rape. But that's another matter. That's
Yeah.
not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm asking a specific technical question.
Yes.
Could it be possible, A, that the police were unaware that this was the home of a diplomat when there are at least 6 other Saudis living there?
Well, this is
And
what the
second,
spokesperson says, doesn't he? And I'm
But
not
I'm
sure.
asking whether it's credible. Journalists question the credibility of what
Yes.
spokespersons say. I'm
Yeah.
asking you whether you agree with
I
the
think
spokesperson
because
or you
this
think
is,
it's not
I'll tell you why I don't think people are questioning the credibility of the spokesperson in this case. A, because this is the first time something like this has happened. Second of all, because of the gravity of the offense. It's a huge matter. And I think that's why you're not willing to question the spokesperson about whether this guy was a diplomat
I don't
or
think
not.
the Vienna Convention can be willingly breached because the gravity of the offence is so great it justifies
But I
the
don't know
breach,
if the
which is
Gurgaon
what you're
police
arguing.
knows what the
But
Vienna
let's come back to the
Convention is.
Gurgaon police. Well,
Yeah.
police ought to know, but if they don't, that's a more incredible situation. But let me bring you in and put this to you. Navdeep Virk, the Gurgaon police commissioner, has gone on record to say that in fact his police did not know this was the home of a diplomat. This morning's papers now surprisingly say that Mr. Virk has gone on 1 week's leave, which seems a very strange time for the police commissioner to take leave when perhaps the most high-profile case in his jurisdiction is happening and becoming a controversy. So I want to ask you a pointed question. As an Arab journalist working in this country who knows India as well as any Indian does, do you believe, A, the Gurgaon police would not have known this was the home of a diplomat?
Absolutely not. I will not give it the benefit of doubt to the police, because you have a diplomatic corps which deal with the diplomat. You have a section which the Indian government has given to them that they can deal with the case. Besides, you know it very well that this compound is belong to all the cars in front of the house is a CD number. And thirdly, the people staying in the house are foreigners. And if I am a foreigner in India, if there is a CD car in front of my home, the police will call that embassy asking them what is this car was doing in this front of the house. So therefore, you cannot claim or give a doubt for it. It's an unfortunate incidents happen. We all agree on that.
Let me ask you a second critical question. If you say that it's impossible to believe the Gurgaon police didn't know this was the home of a diplomat, what about that second issue? Do you think it's possible the Gurgaon police were unaware of the Vienna Convention, which says that you can't barge into the home of a diplomat? Would
No,
they be
you
unaware
have
of
been
it?
trained for this. You cannot say you don't know. If you don't know, that is the catastrophe. If you know, you should know as a policeman.
Well, I don't know.
He's a foreign journalist, a foreign living in the country, and this is a place, a hub for the foreigners. You don't know who is who in the colony. I'm sorry, this is wrong. This is a lapses of the police. So there are lots of loopholes in the case. You have to fill it up and find out who's the culprit really behind this mess.
You've been following this story, your paper in particular has been following this story very closely. What do you make of the fact that today morning Mr. Virk, the police commissioner of Gurgaon, has gone on 1 week's leave. Now, he claims that this leave was always due to him and that it had been sanctioned earlier, which may be the case. But even when leave is due and sanctioned earlier, if you have this sort of controversy happening in an area where you are police commissioner, most police officers actually say, I'll take my leave later, it's more important that I stay. But he's actually gone on leave. What do you make of that? Is it in fact a forced leave, in quotations?
Well, I don't know the facts, but it sounds mysterious. But I don't want to jump to conclusions on this, because there could be other officers who could be handling this case as well. I mean, it's not just the commissioner of police who is the last investigating officer in town. There are layers who could investigate, and right now, in any case, the investigation is right now stalled because the Saudi diplomat is yet to be questioned, and that has not taken place yet because of the diplomatic immunity.
Tell me, Ahmed, given the way the Indian government complained about the manner of Devyani Khobragade's arrest outside her children's school in America when that happened, and given the way we complained how the New York police thereafter treated her, isn't it odd that our system hasn't been more careful in handling a Saudi diplomat?
I am quite appalled by everything that has happened. These things should be handled with great finesse and with much greater sophistication. We feel that all these sensitive issues should be discussed behind the scenes with the officials concerned before they are brought to the public domain. There are huge implications whenever such actions take place. A series of loose allegations have been made. We are not sure about their veracity. There could be some truth, but we don't know. Some of them sound extraordinarily extravagant, and I'm a little skeptical about them. But I believe that given the larger rules that are there and the relationships that are involved, we have to be much more sophisticated, far better than the way the Americans handled our case. As you know, at that time, a deliberate attempt was made to insult and humiliate one of our diplomats. And there was a lot of concern about how everything went forward. And because of that, we have to once again realize that this is not the way that countries deal with each other. Diplomats represent the dignity of another country. They represent the sovereignty of that country. And they are meant to cement relationships.
Can I ask you one other question? Your colleague, the former Foreign Secretary, Kamal Sibbal, twice, maybe on 3 occasions, called the lapse of the Vienna Convention technical. Would you accept that in this instance the lapse is technical?
I do not believe any lapse relating to the Vienna Convention can be a mere technicality. If that were so, we would not be able to function as diplomats. These are all very serious matters. Whenever diplomatic conduct is involved, it has to be handled with great style and finesse. It cannot be brushed aside as a mere technicality. That is not the way we function, and that is not the way that we should allow our instruments of state order to function.
Kamal Sibbal, I want to ask you 2 questions. First of all, you've heard what Wail Awad said, you've heard what Shubhajit Roy said, you've heard what Talmiz Ahmed said. Do you want to reconsider your use of the term technical as a description for the fact that the Vienna Convention was breached in this instance?
Let me put it this way. There have been many cases where diplomats who've committed crimes have been taken to the police station for questioning. I'm talking of countries in the West. And they've been made to prove their diplomatic immunity in the police station, and after they have proved it, after the embassy has intervened, they have been allowed to go. So it's not as if what has happened in New Delhi is something so totally out of the ordinary that we have to make such an issue out of this. That is one. Second is, what we are forgetting is we are not relating what the police did to what caused them to intervene. I think what has happened in the flat, it is certainly not in the line of duty. I mean, the Vienna Convention gives you protection against actions which you do in the course of your official duty. But raping women is not part of your official duties. Now, it could well be, and I'm willing to concede that they may have overreacted. They should have been a little more careful, and they should have taken into account that there is you have to treat the diplomats differently from ordinary citizens. But even if they are transgressed the Vienna Convention, they have not imposed, they have not inflicted any body harm on the person. They have not arrested him, they have not manacled him, they have not put handcuffs on him, they have not humiliated him. They have just barged in and saved the girls. So while I would agree, yes, it is a violation of the convention, but on the other hand, I think on the Saudi side, they should actually not take plea behind this technical lapse, I'll say again, of the Vienna Convention, and judge the whole thing on the basis of what his diplomat was actually accused of, along with so many of his friends. So one should take a balanced view.
Let me put the second question to you. It's to do with the way, in fact, this issue has got immediate publicity. The Saudi embassy have issued a formal statement where they've complained, and I'm quoting, about the unwarranted media briefing before investigations are complete. Given that this is a sensitive case, more importantly, given that our relationship with Saudi Arabia is a critical relationship, should the publicity surrounding this matter have been handled with greater discretion?
But you know, it's very difficult to do this. After all, we have seen in other cases of where women are raped or such incidents take place, the press actually blows it up out of all proportion at times. And it becomes, a subject of media attention in the way that we see our channels, all our channels focused on such events. So it's very difficult to control the media attention to such incidents, and therefore I would say it's part of our system. There are aspects of which certainly are not very laudable, because the embassy is right that this could have been treated more discreetly in terms of media attention, but the case is so sensational. If we were to agree to the contents of the actual charges against the Saudi diplomat and his friends, the case is so sensational, I think it would have been very difficult for the police to suppress it, especially as the NGO was involved. The NGO would have gone to town and informed all the channels, and then the police would have been accused of suppressing this, and the government would have been accused of suppressing this in the interest of the relations with Saudi Arabia. I think on the Saudi Arabia side, if the facts are correct, they should actually take a much more cautious view of the situation and quietly deal with the situation.
Before, I'll stop you there, Kamal Sibal. I'll stop you there because I want to bring in some journalists. I'll stop you there because I want to bring in some journalists on this. This is critically to do with the question you made that the press has blown it up, and it's understandable. Before I come to my two Indian journalists, I believe you can shed some light on this. I believe, in fact, the story broke in the Arab media some 24 hours before the Indian journalists became aware of it at all. Am I right in that?
Well, I came to know on the night of the incidents where the police, Haryana police, have come up with the case and they barged into the house, because I came to follow it up in the night, and we realized that there were 3 girls, not 2 girls actually. The 3rd girl has already left the job, and she was outside. That you could investigate with her whether there was really any kind of atrocity, though the Saudis are known for this, but I wouldn't have given them the benefit of doubt that they can do it in front of their parents, in the front of the children, and the girl who left the job had her mobile in her hand, and the one inside the house still had her mobile throughout, and they have been to Jeddah with them. I'm not saying they are innocent, but I am still saying there are lots of loopholes. It has to be handled with the police, not with the public domain.
Let's come back to this critical question that was made by, the point made by Kamal Sibal, that it's understandable the media will play it up. The media can only play it up when someone tells them about it. And in this instance, the police have been holding A, formal briefings, and B, they've been leaking as they always do. Do you think, given the sensitivity, given that it affects diplomats, given that it affects the critical relationship, the police should have making this information available to us in the first place?
Karan, what are you saying? Are you saying that because India buys 70% or 80% of its oil from Saudi Arabia,
slightly over 50.
Okay, I'm glad. Thank you for correcting me. Slightly over 50% of its oil from Saudi Arabia, we should therefore hush up the gang rape and the torture of 2 girls.
There is a difference between hushing up. No, let me, since you're questioning me, I'll answer that. Okay. I'm not saying hush up, I'm saying handle with discretion.
Which means behind the scenes. And
no,
therefore,
not necessarily behind the scenes. First, make sure that you know what the story is before you go public with it. After all, as Wail pointed out, the story had broken on the Arab media 24 hours before it broke here.
So the question is the story correct or not? The story is correct,
we don't know as yet.
Well, the Chief of Protocol of the Ministry of External Affairs, Jaideep Majumdar, has allegedly met the Saudi ambassador. And
who has denied the story.
He has met the Saudi
But
ambassador.
the Saudi ambassador has denied the story. It's on record in every paper.
Okay. And he has said to the Saudi ambassador, listen, would you like to take your Saudi diplomat back home? Now, they are keeping with the story.
As yet, to be honest, what Jaydeep Mukherjee has said is to say, please waive immunity. We haven't as yet asked them to take the diplomat back home. We've only asked them to waive immunity.
But let me ask you,
which is actually
a precursor possibly, but not necessarily.
In fact,
but let's come back to the story here.
Step.
No, but let's come back here. The story is this. Should the police have gone public with details in an issue that is so sensitive, both to the diplomatic situation and India's strategic relations? That's all I'm asking. You can answer.
What is the question here also for you? Was it really emergency? The case was really emergency that you have to barge in the house? Was it rape at the same point? Or was it the case is on for some time? So you have enough time to sit down and study your case. That's the point.
No, the point is.
Let me bring you in there. You're a working journalist like Jyoti. Do you think and you've been a diplomatic correspondent as well. Do you think, given the sensitivity, that the police were right, A, to hold formal public briefings, which they did, and B, to leak through sources? Or should they have been more discreet? And should they perhaps have consulted the MEA about how public we go and when we go public?
Look, as reporters, when we get facts, whether it comes from any source, we try and get a version of the other side.
Absolutely.
That is what we did the first day when we called up the Saudi ambassador and took his version, where he denied it as completely false. It's our job to question facts. If we are not questioning, we are not doing our job.
That I agree. And therefore, when Kamal Sibal says that the media blowed it out of proportion, although he thinks it's understandable, I don't think the media did blow it out of proportion. But what I'm questioning is something else. Should the police have been actually going public themselves or leaking through sources, or should they have asked the MEA first, given the sensitivity, how do we handle this?
I understand the Gurgaon police was in touch with the MEA as well as the Nepal embassy on this issue.
And the MEA advised the Gurgaon police possibly?
I don't know that, but the Gurgaon police was just answering questions which were being posed by journalists like us, reporters who wanted to know the facts.
Tabriz Ahmed, you know Saudi Arabia, you've served there twice as ambassador, you've also served in Oman and the United Arab Emirates, therefore you have a great understanding of West Asia. I want to once again quote from the Hindu front page. Police are seen on the video, the paper says, barging into the residence, pushing aside family members who are physically resisting their entry. How will that go down, A, in Saudi Arabia and B, in the Arab world? Could it have a damaging impact on our relationship with them?
I think this matter has been quite badly handled from what you have just read out. This is not the way in which serious issues relating to diplomatic interaction should have been handled. If such a thing had happened to our colleague in some other station, we would have been absolutely furious. There are ways in which these matters can be handled behind the scenes between diplomats, senior officers, and on the basis of an interaction, we then take a view. I personally feel this will go down very badly because the man has been condemned before any investigation has been completed on the basis of certain loose remarks made by certain people, which have got a lot of loopholes in them. So I am quite concerned about the way this is being done. This is not the way in which we deal with serious countries. We should have conducted ourselves with far greater sophistication than we've shown.
Can I ask you something else, Wailawad? I'm now flipping the discussion deliberately. Saudi diplomats internationally have a pretty, what's the euphemistic word, terrible reputation. The British papers, particularly The Independent, roughly since about 2006, annually publish lists of diplomats who offend British laws. And fairly frequently, if not most of the time, the Saudis head that list. And quite often, the Saudis end up being charged with offences such as trafficking in human beings, as well as drunken driving charges, for which, if they were guilty in their own country, they'd get 800 lashes. In Britain, all that happens is they get deported, they don't even get named. Do Saudi diplomats have a problem? I'm asking a blunt question.
Well, I don't think the Saudi themselves, the whole Saudi Arabia, there are a vast majority of problem in Saudi Arabia. In fact, because lots of incidents have taken place inside Saudi Arabia. That's why mates from India stopped going there, because there is lots of atrocities against the servants in the house, whether it's a male or a female. It happened many times. Nevertheless, yet in Saudi more than happy to find Indian mates in their houses because they feel more comfortable with them. But that doesn't give them the clean sheet on that.
You said a very important thing. The Saudis are known for
Yes.
maltreating, mistreating,
Absolutely, yes.
physically mistreating
physically
maids from other parts of the world.
beating from Philippines, from Sri Lanka, from India. It has been happening. We have been reporting. We have seen in the media, and there are lots of people have been even prosecuted inside their country. But the diplomat doesn't have that clean record on many occasions. I'm saying that the girl will not go and complain unless and until there are vested interests of certain people who wanted to exploit. You don't forget that Nepal's sensitivity relation to India is also at stake, because you have two countries here. I'm questioning the way, the manner in which you dealt with the case, which should have been dealt more delicacy and dealing with the complaint in a more professional manner.
Very quickly, Kamal Sibal, what now, as a former Foreign Secretary, are the options available to the MEA? We've asked the Saudi ambassador to waive the immunity of this diplomat. The Saudi ambassador has refused to do so. Now, what are the options available to us?
Well, he is within his right to refuse, and in such cases, unless the person belongs to countries which are very sensitive about the rule of law, and when an egregious crime has been committed, some of these countries waive diplomatic immunity. In this case, I suppose, given the nature of Saudi society and the fact that they are not as wedded to the rule of law as some other countries are, they would insist on not waiving the diplomatic immunity, and then there would be no option but for us to ask the diplomat to go back home. But Karan, I am a bit surprised that many of the people on your program are questioning even the fact that this occurred. Now, there are the doctor's reports that have appeared in the press today which clearly show that these women were were abused sexually in a horrendous manner. And then don't forget the Nepalese embassy is involved and the Nepalese ambassador is involved. So it's not as if information on this can be simply suppressed by us. The Nepalese embassy can raise these questions before the Indian press. So it's a very complicated affair. And the effort I find among some of your panelists to give the benefit of the doubt to the Saudis and the Saudi diplomat as if nothing happened surprises me, frankly.
Well, let me put it like this, Kamal Sibal. Wael Awad has a right to question it on the grounds that these people had phones, that these people could have been in contact. That's his opinion. In a democracy and in a free media, we encourage different opinions. Whether they are the right ones or the wrong ones in your impression is another matter. But the whole object of a discussion is for people to have a right to say what they want. And just as Wael said what he wanted to, you have a right to question Wael's right to say it. We're talking now about the implications this rather sad and sorry incident could have on India's critical relationship with two countries, Saudi Arabia and Nepal. Tamiz Ahmed, first of all, let me ask you, you've been ambassador to Saudi Arabia on two separate occasions. What impact will this have on India-Saudi relations? Or is that perhaps an exaggerated fear at this point of time?
See, this is a serious matter, but the relationship is much bigger and wider. So to imagine that overnight there will be a reduction in the level of goodwill or the kind of cooperation that is ongoing, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I personally feel that, yes, we should have handled it better. There could be some protocol implications from the Saudi side. Privately, they will inform our chargé d'affaires that this is not the way you should have done this. They may even give a suggestion to us that they will investigate and take legal action. But the fact remains that diplomats have to be treated differently. Okay. There are international norms and rules in position for nearly 200 years in this regard. And I think that they are for the good. I don't want to exaggerate the negative impact on the bilateral relationship because that is a product of national interest over several years.
Shubhajit Roy, I want to quote some facts in your paper today. In fact, I think they were in an article you wrote yourself. There are some 2.4 million Indians living and working in Saudi Arabia. It's the largest provider of oil to India. The bilateral trade relationship is worth some nearly $50 billion. It's gone up threefold in the last 5 years. Could this have an impact on any of that, or is that unlikely?
It will be, unfortunate if this particular incident has an impact on bilateral relations. But at the same time, I've been speaking to a lot of officials in South Bloc, and they've been saying that this is a diplomatic time bomb that they're facing. A minefield they're facing. which where they have to balance between two very friendly countries, one with great strategic interests as well as investment interests. On the other hand, you have a very close neighbor where you have this government wants to really elevate the relationship. So in this kind of situation, if this diplomatic incident as it has been handled, and if it is not resolved at the earliest, this could have repercussions.
So
at the bilateral
it could become much more serious if it's not handled delicately and quickly.
Absolutely.
Kamal Sambal, you pay a lot of attention to strategic issues. Now, after the Iran-US nuclear deal went through, many people believe Saudi Arabia's relationships with Pakistan have considerably warmed up. In addition, if you look beyond Saudi Arabia, there are some 7 million Indians working in the West Asia region, many centered around the Gulf. Could this situation, this problem, if it's not handled properly, impact all of that?
I think some of the things that have been said just now are, to my mind, quite exaggerated, and I don't see how people in the Ministry of External Affairs are feeling that this is a minefield or anything of that kind. Now, if the internal investigations of the Saudis show that their diplomat and his friends were guilty of this, then their whole attitude to the problem will change. Now, if in actual fact, as some of your panelists are saying, that this incident never occurred and there are loopholes, then yes, then it becomes a very serious problem. Because then you are actually not only violating the diplomatic immunity of the diplomat, but you are also maligning the diplomat and through him the country. And then the Saudis can react a little more sharply. Now, insofar as Nepal is concerned, they also know what the Vienna Convention is. They also know that the diplomats have diplomatic immunity. They understand that India's capacity to deal with this is limited, and there is no way we can imprison him and punish him, unless, of course, the case proceeds forward after waiver of diplomatic immunity, which won't happen. So they also know that at the end of the day, this diplomat will be removed, and I think the matter will be closed. I don't share any of the concerns that are being voiced, including by a former ambassador to Saudi Arabia. This will be dealt with quietly, but on the assumption that the Saudi Arabia's internal investigation show that the man was guilty.
Very quickly, because the former Foreign Secretary said he disagreed with your comment that many in the MA look upon this as a potential minefield. You want to have a quick word back?
Yeah, I mean, Sauda, right now, that is what the current administration feels. I mean, he's entitled to his views, but that is what the views of the current administration officials are. I mean, because they are facing a diplomatic challenge. So that's a factually correct assessment of the situation as of now.
Jyoti Malhotra, the second country that's critically affected is, of course, Nepal. And it's a country that's very close, not just to India as a neighbor, but it's also a country that Mr. Modi has paid special attention to in the 15 months he's been Prime Minister. And clearly, both the Nepalese government and Nepali public opinion will be looking for justice. How much of a problem does that create for India?
Actually, I have to say that the Ministry of External Affairs has handled this quite well. On the one hand, there is Nepal, which is a very important neighbor. The Prime Minister has visited at least twice in the last year. And as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, he is going there in a couple of months or so.
So we're told.
Yes, and I think he is likely to go before the year is out. Now, both are important neighbors, but I think what has been really interesting is that I think for the first time in at least the last 25 years, or at least in recent memory, that the MEA, that the government has got involved in a situation like this. And I think because India...
Have there been other such situations like this where the government didn't get involved?
No, I'm not sure. What I'm saying is, at least in a public situation like this, where in Delhi you've had allegedly an incident where a diplomat has been involved in allegedly sort of brutalizing two young girls or two women. Now, I'm just wondering, in a democracy like ours, which is sort of a fractious, opinionated kind of democracy, how would, when a story like this came out into the open...
Jyoti, let's stick to specific questions. If we ramble into the whole wide philosophy of the whole thing, we'll never answer. Just tell me this. How critical is this from Nepal's point of view that they want justice, and how much of a problem does that create for us when we can't provide the man who's allegedly guilty? There's nothing we can do if they don't give him to us. Will that create a problem for Mr. Modi and the MEA?
No, I don't see why should it create a problem if if you come to the conclusion that the man is guilty. You've asked the Saudi ambassador to waive his immunity, which he denies the incident in the first place. Therefore, he says he will not waive his immunity. The next step is that the MEA will declare, or should declare, or could declare him persona non grata.
And the guilty man then goes scot-free.
No. The guilty man doesn't go scot-free. He is asked to return to his country. And that, I think, is ample punishment for a diplomat. And I think the Nepali government will feel assuaged that if the Saudi diplomat is returned to his country and he's declared persona non grata, which means that his diplomatic privileges are waived, and therefore he cannot stay in India when he doesn't have diplomatic immunity. Therefore, he has to return. I think that's ample punishment.
But he may not get any punishment in his country.
No, that we don't care about. That's up to the laws of the Saudis.
So
how should
it's sufficient from our point of view that he should be thrown out of India?
I think so, and I think
how is this
also
being
on the part of the
covered
Nepalis.
in the Arab world?
Well, it was covered extensively because it is an incident where diplomat is involved, especially at this critical stage where the Saudis are already bombing in Yemen, involved in Syria. So everybody wanted something to tarnish the image of a country where they are involved in many mischievous things. But I would say also that let me give the benefit of doubt. I don't give the benefit of doubt to the Saudi, nor I can give him, because if this is proved to be guilty and the police have enough evidence, I think if I were the ambassador of Saudi Arabia, I will revoke his diplomatic immunity, get him into the investigation, put them both in the lie detector, find out the story and finish it off there. Otherwise, what is the point of dragging the story?
But he's not going to do that.
So that means, my sources tells me that both of them have left the country. The diplomat left the country and the maid left the country. And India left to handle the mess.
I want to go back to Talmiz Ahmed. Talmiz, we have only 1 minute left, so you have to be very brief. Do you want a word back? Kamal Sibal, as a former foreign secretary, says that he completely disagreed with what you said could be the serious nature of the impact on Indo-Saudi Arabian relations. He thought you were exaggerating. Do you want a last word?
If you recall, I had said that it will not have a serious impact on our relationship. Our relationship is much deeper and much wider and the product of our national interest. I'm not sure it's going to have a serious impact on our relationship at all. The Saudis are quite sophisticated in this regard. They are familiar with our system. I don't think they will exaggerate the situation. They will recognize the fact that at a lower level, certain bureaucratic misconduct may have taken place, but they will handle it. They are quite sophisticated and mature people. I don't worry about the relationship. I worry about the way we are conducting ourselves at home.
In other words, your concern is that we are not living up to the high standards that we purportedly set for ourselves. We're letting ourselves down. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there are very clear rules that we uphold where the other countries are concerned. You will recall here what had happened some time back in New York. Let's be now, we should be even-handed in these matters. We don't want others treating our people in the same way again.
All right, that's probably a very fair point. Do unto others as you would have them do unto yourselves. That is a biblical pronouncement, but it applies to diplomats and ordinary human beings as well. My thanks to all my guests for joining me for what has been, I suspect, a somewhat controversial discussion, particularly because for the first time we've raised in public the question, have we as a state, not as a government, but as a state and as a system, handled this with the adroitness it deserved, or have we let down some important principles that otherwise we want to abide by? That's something to consider, even though that doesn't in any way exonerate the Saudis from what is allegedly a terrible crime committed by one of their diplomats. Goodbye.